The night wind howled across the prairie as Isaac Sinclair stood alone on the platform of Cottonwood Springs Station, his weathered face illuminated by the flickering lantern light. The last train of the evening was approaching, its distant whistle cutting through the Montana Territory darkness like a knife. Isaac wasn't waiting for anyone. He'd simply come to collect a package of supplies, but something about this particular April evening in 1878 told him his life was about to change forever. Isaac tugged his worn Stetson lower over his eyes and shifted his weight from one boot to the other. At 34, he'd spent most of his life on horseback, working cattle across the Western Territories. His ranch, the Double S, was finally turning a profit after years of drought, rustlers, and the general hardships that came with carving a life from this unforgiving land. Last train coming in, Mr. Sinclair, called Old Pete, the station master. Mighty late tonight. Trouble on the line, I reckon. Isaac merely nodded. Words weren't something he wasted, especially not on speculation about train schedules. His father had raised him on the philosophy that a man was judged by his actions, not his chatter, and Isaac had taken that lesson to heart, particularly after watching his father waste away from grief when his mother died in childbirth. The locomotive's approach grew louder, the ground beneath Isaac's boots vibrating as the great iron beast pulled into the station with a screech of brakes and a billow of steam. Only a handful of passengers disembarked at this remote stop: a traveling salesman, a young couple that looked to be newlyweds, and finally, a woman who caught Isaac's attention immediately. She stood alone on the platform, one hand resting protectively over her swollen belly, the other clutching a small valise. Even in the dim light, Isaac could see she was beautiful, with honey-colored hair escaping from beneath a modest bonnet. Her dress, though of good quality, was wrinkled from travel, and the dark circles under her eyes spoke of exhaustion. Isaac watched as she glanced around anxiously, clearly expecting someone to meet her. When no one approached, her shoulders slumped, and she sank down onto a nearby bench, her face crumpling with despair. Something about her vulnerability pierced through Isaac's carefully constructed defenses. Before he could think better of it, he found himself walking toward her. "Excuse me, madam," he said, removing his hat. "Are you waiting for someone?" She looked up, startled, revealing eyes the color of summer cornflowers. "Yes, that is to say, I was," she stammered. "My fiancé was supposed to meet me, but it appears he's not coming." Isaac frowned. "It's mighty late. Perhaps he was delayed." The woman shook her head, a bitter smile touching her lips. "No, Mr. Sinclair. Isaac Sinclair. Mr. Sinclair. I'm Emma Owens." She straightened her spine with visible effort. "And I believe I've been abandoned." The blunt admission caught Isaac off guard. Most ladies he'd known would have invented excuses or collapsed into tears. This one faced her situation head-on, despite the trembling of her lower lip. "You're with child," he stated unnecessarily. "Yes, hence my predicament." Her voice was steady, but her fingers twisted nervously in her lap. "I foolishly believed Marcus's promises. He sent for me, claiming he'd built us a home and arranged for a minister. Now I find myself alone, pregnant, and unmarried in a town where I know no one." Isaac shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't his problem. He'd sworn after watching his father's descent into misery that he'd never marry, never risk that kind of heartbreak. Women were nothing but trouble, and this one had more troubles than most. "There's a boarding house in town," he said gruffly. "Mrs. Peterson's place. She might take you in for the night." "Thank you," Emma replied, rising to her feet with dignity. "I appreciate your kindness." As she picked up her valise, the station master approached, an envelope in hand. "Miss Owens? This was left for you earlier today." Emma opened the letter with trembling fingers. As she read, the color drained from her face. She swayed slightly, and Isaac instinctively reached out to steady her. "He's not coming," she whispered. "Marcus writes that he's taken a position in San Francisco. He says—" Her voice broke. "He says he's realized he's not ready for the responsibilities of a family, and I should return east to my parents." "That yellow-bellied coward," Isaac muttered, surprising himself with his anger. "Begging your pardon, madam. No offense taken. It's an accurate assessment." Emma folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her reticule. "Unfortunately, I have no family to return to. My parents died last winter." I sold everything to come west. The last passengers were boarding the train again, and the conductor called the final warning. Emma glanced at the train, then back at Isaac, indecision written across her features. You could continue on, Isaac suggested, though the thought of this vulnerable woman traveling alone in her condition bothered him more than it should. Emma shook her head. I have barely enough money for a few nights' lodging. Besides, she placed a protective hand on her belly. The journey has been difficult. The doctor in Denver advised me to rest before continuing. The train whistle blew, and with a great hiss of steam, it began pulling away from the station. Emma watched it go, her posture resolute despite the tears shimmering in her eyes. Isaac knew he should simply direct her to Mrs. Peterson's and be on his way. It wasn't his responsibility to solve this woman's problems. And yet, something about her courage in the face of abandonment struck a chord in him. Miss Owens, he said, the words coming before he could stop them. I have a ranch about 5 miles from town. It's not much, but there's a spare room in the house. You're welcome to stay there while you figure out your next steps. Emma regarded him warily. That's very generous, Mr. Sinclair, but I couldn't possibly impose. Besides, it wouldn't be proper. My housekeeper, Mrs. Ramirez, lives there too. She's a respectable widow who'd chop off my hand if I stepped out of line. He attempted a smile. You'd be perfectly safe. Why would you help a stranger? Emma asked, studying his face. It was a fair question, one Isaac wasn't entirely sure he could answer. Because it's the right thing to do, he said finally. And because I reckon that baby deserves a fighting chance, even if its father is a no-good scoundrel. Emma considered his offer for a long moment. Isaac could see her weighing her limited options against the risk of trusting a man she'd just met. Finally, practicality won out. Thank you, Mr. Sinclair. I accept your offer, at least until I can secure employment in town. Isaac nodded, collecting his package from Pete before leading Emma to his wagon. He helped her up onto the seat, careful not to touch her more than necessary. As they pulled away from the station, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just made a decision that would change everything. The journey to the Double S passed mostly in silence. Emma was clearly exhausted, occasionally dozing against the side of the wagon only to jerk awake when they hit a rough patch in the road. Isaac found himself driving more carefully than usual, avoiding potholes and slowing over bumps for her comfort. When they finally arrived, the main house was dark except for a single lamp burning in the kitchen window. Isaac helped Emma down from the wagon and led her inside, where the warm, savory scent of stew still lingered in the air. Mrs. Ramirez must have gone to bed, Isaac said quietly. She rises early to prepare breakfast for the ranch hands. Emma nodded, taking in the simple but clean kitchen with its large wooden table, cast iron stove, and rows of copper pots hanging from hooks. I'll show you to your room, Isaac offered, lighting a second lamp and leading her down a short hallway. It's not fancy, but it's comfortable enough. The bedroom was small but tidy, with a narrow bed covered in a colorful quilt, a washstand with basin and pitcher, and a wooden chest of drawers. A braided rug softened the plank floor, and curtains framed the single window. This is lovely, Emma said sincerely. Thank you. Bathrooms down the hall, Isaac said, suddenly awkward. There's clean towels in the chest. Mrs. Ramirez will help you with anything else you need in the morning. Emma set her valise on the bed. Mr. Sinclair, I want you to know that I don't expect charity. I'm a skilled seamstress and cook. I can earn my keep while I'm here. Isaac nodded, appreciating her pride. We'll talk about that tomorrow. For now, get some rest. He left her then, retreating to his own room at the end of the hall. As he prepared for bed, Isaac questioned his own sanity. What had possessed him to bring a pregnant, unmarried woman home to his ranch? He had enough problems without adding a woman's troubles to the mix. Yet something about Emma Owens had reached past his defenses and touched a part of himself he'd long ago buried, the part that still believed in doing what was right, even when it wasn't easy. Morning arrived with the crowing of roosters and the distant lowing of cattle. Isaac rose before dawn, as was his habit, and was surprised to find Emma already in the kitchen, helping Mrs. Ramirez prepare breakfast. Good morning, Mr. Sinclair. Emma greeted him, her face flushed from the heat of the stove. She looked better after a night's rest, though still pale. Miss Owens. He nodded, accepting a cup of coffee from Mrs. Ramirez, a plump, gray-haired Mexican woman who'd been with the ranch since his father's time. "Your señorita, she is a good helper," Mrs. Ramirez said approvingly. "Makes excellent biscuits." "She's not my," Isaac began, but was interrupted by the arrival of his foreman, Jake Turner. "Boss, we got trouble at the North Creek," Jake announced, helping himself to coffee. "Fence is down, and about 20 head got through overnight." Isaac cursed under his breath. "Round up the boys. We'll head out after breakfast." He turned to Emma, who was setting plates on the table. "Miss Owens, make yourself at home. I'll be gone most of the day." "I understand," she replied. "Mrs. Ramirez has kindly offered to show me around the house and gardens." Over the next week, a routine developed. Isaac would leave early with his men to tend to ranch business, returning in the evenings to find Emma seamlessly integrated into household life. She helped Mrs. Ramirez with cooking and cleaning, and in her spare time, she mended clothes for the ranch hands, who were appreciative of her skillful needlework. Isaac tried to maintain his distance, but found himself increasingly drawn to Emma's gentle presence. She had a quiet dignity about her, never complaining despite her condition and circumstances. And to his surprise, she had a sharp mind for business, offering several practical suggestions for improving the ranch's ledgers when she noticed him struggling with the accounts one evening. "You have a good head for numbers," he remarked, impressed by her neat columns and accurate calculations. "My father was a merchant," she explained. "He insisted I learn bookkeeping alongside my more feminine accomplishments." "Your parents would be proud of how you're handling yourself," Isaac said. A shadow crossed Emma's face. "I'm not sure about that. They raised me to be a respectable woman, and here I am, unmarried and with child." "Life doesn't always go according to plan," Isaac said softly. "What matters is how you face the challenges." Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted between them, a moment of understanding that left Isaac feeling unsettled. He excused himself shortly afterward, retreating to the safety of the barn where he spent an hour grooming his horse and thinking about the woman who was gradually working her way past his defenses. As the days turned into weeks, Emma's presence at the Double S began to transform the ranch in subtle ways. Fresh curtains appeared in the windows, wildflowers graced the dinner table, and the previously sparse living room became a welcoming space with rearranged furniture and colorful quilts draped over the backs of chairs. The ranch hands, initially wary of having a lady in their midst, soon warmed to Emma's kind nature and excellent cooking. Even Jake, who'd been skeptical about the arrangement, was won over when Emma darned his favorite shirt that had been declared beyond repair. Isaac found himself looking forward to evenings at the ranch house, where Emma would often read aloud from one of the few books in his small collection while he smoked his pipe by the fireplace. Her voice, melodious and expressive, brought the stories to life in a way he'd never experienced before. One evening in late May, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in shades of pink and gold, Emma winced suddenly, her hand flying to her belly. "Are you all right?" Isaac asked, alarmed. "Yes," she assured him, though her face was pinched with discomfort. "The baby is just very active today." Before he could stop himself, Isaac asked, "May I?" His hand hovered uncertainly near her rounded abdomen. Emma looked surprised but nodded. Gently, he placed his calloused palm against the swell of her belly, feeling an immediate, strong kick against his hand. Wonder spread across his features. "That's quite a fighter you've got in there," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "He or she certainly is," Emma agreed, her eyes shining with maternal pride. "Sometimes I imagine it's a little girl with her father's dark hair and my blue eyes." "And sometimes," Isaac prompted, "sometimes I picture a little boy who will grow up to be strong and honorable," she replied, her gaze meeting his. "Like you." The simple compliment struck Isaac to the core. No one had ever looked at him the way Emma did, as though he were something precious and good. It terrified him and thrilled him in equal measure. The moment was broken by Mrs. Ramirez calling them in for supper, but something had shifted irrevocably between them. That night, lying in his bed, Isaac faced a truth he'd been avoiding. He was falling in love with Emma Owens. The realization should have sent him running. After all, he'd sworn never to marry, never to risk the devastation his father had experienced. Yet instead of fear, Isaac felt an unfamiliar sense of peace. Emma wasn't like other women he'd known. She was strong in ways that mattered, resilient, practical, and kind-hearted. And her child. Isaac found himself thinking of the baby not as another man's, but as a gift, a ready-made family that he could be part of, if only he were brave enough to reach for it. The following day, Isaac rode into town to speak with Reverend Thomas at the small white church. The conversation was brief but productive, and Isaac left with a lighter heart and a small velvet box in his pocket. Upon returning to the ranch, he found Emma in the garden, harvesting fresh vegetables for dinner. The June sun highlighted golden strands in her hair, and her cheeks were flushed with healthy color. At nearly 7 months along, her pregnancy was prominently visible, but she moved with a grace that took his breath away. "Miss Owens," he called, dismounting from his horse. "Might I have a word?" Emma straightened, brushing soil from her hands. "Of course, Mr. Sinclair." It struck Isaac as absurd that after all this time, they still addressed each other so formally. "Isaac," he corrected. "Please call me Isaac." A smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Then you must call me Emma." He nodded, suddenly nervous. "Emma, I've been thinking about your situation." Her smile faded. "Yes, I've been meaning to discuss that with you as well. I know I can't impose on your hospitality indefinitely. Perhaps it's time I looked for more permanent arrangements in town." "No," Isaac said quickly, more forcefully than he'd intended. "That's not what I meant." He took a deep breath. "Emma, these past weeks have been different. Good different. I never thought I'd want a woman in my life, let alone a family. My own childhood taught me that loving someone means risking heartbreak when you lose them." Emma's eyes softened with understanding. "Your mother? She died giving birth to what would have been my sister. The baby didn't survive either." Isaac swallowed hard. "My father never recovered. He was like a ghost, going through the motions of living but never really there. I swore I'd never put myself in that position." "Oh, Isaac," Emma said softly. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be," he replied. "Because if I hadn't been so set against marriage, I might never have met you. It took a woman left at a train station to show me what I've been missing all these years." Emma's eyes widened as Isaac reached into his pocket and withdrew the small box. Inside was a simple gold band set with a single pearl. "I'm not a man of many words, Emma, but I want you to know that I care deeply for you. And for your child." He took her hand in his. "I'm asking if you would do me the honor of becoming my wife. I promise to be a good husband to you and a father to your baby." Tears filled Emma's eyes. "Isaac, are you certain? My child is another man's." "No," Isaac interrupted firmly. "If you agree to marry me, that child will be ours. I don't care who planted the seed. I want to be there when it grows." A tear slipped down Emma's cheek. "You're a remarkable man, Isaac Sinclair. And yes, I will marry you." With hands that trembled slightly, Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger. It was a perfect fit, as though meant to be there all along. Reverend Thomas said he could perform the ceremony this Sunday, if that suits you. Isaac said, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Emma smiled through her tears. Sunday would be perfect. The news of their engagement spread quickly through the ranch and into town. Most people reacted with surprise. Isaac Sinclair, the confirmed bachelor, marrying a pregnant woman he barely knew. But those who had seen them together these past weeks understood. There was a rightness to their union that transcended conventional beginnings. Mrs. Ramirez was particularly pleased, bustling about the house with renewed energy as she prepared for the wedding. "I knew it," she declared to anyone who would listen. "I saw how he looked at her from the first day, like a man seeing sunrise after too many dark nights." The ceremony took place on a bright Sunday morning in the Cottonwood Springs Church. Emma wore a simple cream-colored dress that Mrs. Ramirez had altered to accommodate her growing belly, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers gathered from the ranch meadows. Isaac, unrecognizable in a new suit and freshly trimmed hair, waited nervously at the altar. When Emma walked down the aisle toward him, Isaac felt as though his heart might burst from his chest. She was radiant, her face glowing with happiness and health. As she took her place beside him, he knew with absolute certainty that he was making the right choice. The vows were traditional, but spoken with genuine feeling. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac leaned down to kiss his bride with a tenderness that brought tears to the eyes of even the most stoic ranchers in attendance. The celebration afterward was held at the Double S, with tables set up in the yard and enough food and drink to feed half the territory. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the land, Isaac found a moment alone with his new wife. "Are you happy, Mrs. Sinclair?" he asked, still marveling at the sound of his name paired with hers. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Emma replied, leaning into his embrace. "When Marcus abandoned me, I thought my life was over. Now I see it was just beginning." Isaac placed a protective hand over her belly, feeling the baby kick in response. "Our life," he corrected gently. "All three of us." The summer passed in a blur of domestic happiness. Isaac found himself rushing through ranch work to return home earlier each day, eager to spend time with Emma. They would often sit together in the evenings, making plans for the baby's arrival and talking about their hopes for the future. Emma transformed the small bedroom next to theirs into a nursery, sewing curtains and a quilt with fabric ordered from the mercantile in town. Isaac surprised her by crafting a wooden cradle, working on it secretly in the barn during evenings when she retired early. When he presented it to her, carefully sanded and polished to a warm glow, Emma burst into tears of joy. "It's beautiful, Isaac. Our baby will sleep so peacefully in it." "Our baby," he repeated, the words feeling right on his tongue. In his heart, the child Emma carried was already his, bound by love, if not by blood. As Emma's time grew nearer, Isaac arranged for the doctor in town to stay at the ranch for a few days around her due date. The memory of his mother's death still haunted him, and he was determined to take every precaution to ensure Emma's safety. "You're worrying too much," Emma told him one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting protectively over her enormous belly. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "I know," Isaac admitted. "But I can't lose you, Emma. You and this baby, you're my whole world now." She turned her face to his, kissing him softly. "You won't lose us. I promise." Despite her reassurances, Isaac grew increasingly anxious as August arrived, bringing with it scorching heat and the imminent arrival of their child. He took to sleeping lightly, waking at Emma's slightest movement or sound. It was just past midnight on August 15th when Emma shook him awake, her face tense with pain. "Isaac, it's time." The next 12 hours were the longest of Isaac's life. He paced outside their bedroom while the doctor and Mrs. Ramirez attended to Emma, flinching at each cry of pain that filtered through the door. The ranch hands avoided the house, sensing their boss's agitation, though Jake occasionally brought coffee and awkward words of encouragement. "Women are tough, boss," he offered. "Mrs. Sinclair is tougher than most." Isaac nodded gratefully, though no words could ease the knot of fear in his gut. He found himself praying for the first time since childhood, bargaining with God for the lives of his wife and child. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, a new sound filled the house, the lusty cry of a newborn. Isaac froze in the hallway, hardly daring to breathe until the bedroom door opened and the doctor emerged, smiling broadly. "Congratulations, Mr. Sinclair. You have a healthy daughter, and your wife is doing just fine." Relief crashed over Isaac like a wave, leaving him momentarily speechless. When he found his voice, it was rough with emotion. "Can I see them?" The doctor nodded, stepping aside to let Isaac enter the bedroom. Emma lay propped against pillows, her face tired but radiant, cradling a small bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. She looked up as he approached, her smile so full of love it nearly brought him to his knees. "Isaac, come meet your daughter," she said softly. He moved to the bedside, perching carefully on the edge of the mattress. Emma tilted the bundle toward him, revealing a tiny face with delicate features and a surprising amount of dark hair. "She's perfect," Isaac whispered, reaching out a trembling finger to touch his daughter's velvet cheek. The baby's eyes opened at his touch, revealing a deep blue that matched her mother's. "She has your eyes. And your hair," Emma noted. "What shall we name her?" Isaac hadn't given much thought to names, assuming Emma would have preferences. "What do you think?" Emma considered for a moment. "I was thinking of Hope, because that's what she represents for both of us, a new hope for the future." "Hope Sinclair." Isaac tested the name, finding it suited the tiny miracle before him. "It's perfect." As if in agreement, little Hope grasped his finger with surprising strength, and Isaac felt the last barrier around his heart dissolve completely. This child born of another man's seed, but now irrevocably his in all the ways that mattered, had claimed him as surely as if she shared his blood. "Would you like to hold her?" Emma asked. Isaac hesitated only briefly before nodding. With careful instruction from Emma, he gathered the tiny bundle into his arms, supporting Hope's head in the crook of his elbow. The weight of her so light, yet somehow anchoring him to the earth, filled him with wonder. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I'm your pa." Hope yawned widely, then settled against his chest with perfect trust. In that moment, Isaac knew he would move heaven and earth to protect this child and her mother. The fear that had gripped him that loving them meant risking unbearable loss was still there, but it was overshadowed by the joy of having them in his life. "I love you," he said, looking from Hope to Emma. "Both of you, more than I ever thought possible." Emma reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "And we love you, Isaac Sinclair, the man who never wanted a family, but found one anyway." In the years that followed, the double S flourished under Isaac and Emma's careful stewardship. Hope grew into a spirited little girl with her mother's quick mind and her father's determination. She was joined 2 years later by a brother, Joseph, and then twin girls, Sarah and Rebecca, completing their family. Isaac never regretted the decision he'd made that fateful evening at Cottonwood Springs Station. The man who had sworn he'd never marry had found his greatest happiness in the love of the woman left behind and the family they created together. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but as he often told Emma on starlit evenings as they sat on the porch watching their children play, it was infinitely better than any future he could have imagined for himself. "Some might say I rescued you that night," he would say, his arm around her waist. "But the truth is, Emma, you rescued me from a life half-lived and a heart that was afraid to love." And Emma would smile, leaning into his embrace, secure in the knowledge that their unexpected beginning had led to the most beautiful of destinies.